Acknowledgement. Thank you, Sydney Banks, for sharing the principles you have discovered with the world. It is because of you that I have been able to find the truth within myself and now have the same privilege of sharing it with the world. Thank you to my teachers and mentors, Joy Bally and Michael Neal, for sharing the three principles with me, which have changed my life forever. You have my eternal gratitude for your generosity and heart of service that keeps on giving. Thank you for all you do and will continue to do for others. Thank you to all my dear friends and family, mom, dad, Anthony, James, Christian, Brian, and many more, for helping me discover my own divinity and for encouraging me to write this book. Without any of you, the book would not be in existence. Please know that because of you, the impact you have on me and anyone who will ever come across this book is infinite and will continue to change the lives of generations yet to born. Thank you, Kena, for being one of the loveliest, ever efficient souls I've ever experienced and for showing me what true unconditional love is. I am perpetually humbled by your beautiful presence and can never thank you enough for the gift of your never ending love for me and everyone you meet. Introduction. What will you discover in this book and how to get the most out of reading it? This book was written to help you find everything you've been searching for and the answers to all the questions you've had your entire life. I understand this is a very bold statement, but you will shortly see why I have complete confidence in saying this. What I know to be the truth from the depths of my soul is that you will not be the same person as you were after you read this book. The only constant is change. Growth is an inevitable process of life, and it will be impossible for you not to change after reading this book. We cannot change what we are not aware of, and once we are aware, we cannot help but change. Sherlyn Sandberg. No matter who you are, where you are from, what your background is, what you have done and haven't done, what status or wealth you do or do not have, Martian or not, you can find total peace, unconditional love, complete fulfillment, and an abundance of joy in your life. I promise that you're not the exception, even though it may seem like it. Love knows no boundaries. An open mind and a willing heart are all you need to receive every answer you've been looking for. And yes, there are extremely practical implications and byproducts of understanding what is inside of this book, which many of my coaching clients have experienced, such as a 2 to 5x increase in income, exponential growth in their businesses, deeper and more harmonious relationships, overcoming lifelong addictions, the spontaneous disappearance of destructive habits, an increase in health, vitality, and overall energy. Miracles like these occur every day for many who understand the principles within this book. If I were to just list some of the improvements and results people have gotten from this understanding, more than half of this book would just be stories of such miracles that happen daily. I am reluctant to mention any of these external results because it is not the point of this book. These physical manifestations are the byproduct of this inside out understanding of how our experiences of life work. In actuality, we only want these external results like money and significance because we want to experience certain feelings inside, such as love, joy, peace, and fulfillment. The feeling is really what we want in our lives, not the physical things, but the trap is that we believe the physical things will give us those feelings. The secret lies within the feeling. This book will help guide you to understand how to uncover the truth you already know inside and discover these feelings you've been looking for your entire life. Now, let's get into the guide of how to go through this book. Don't read this book for information, read it for insight. Insight or wisdom can only be found within. This is why it is called insight, inside. To find everything you're looking for in life, you must look inside yourself and discover the wisdom that already exists within you. All the answers lie deep within your soul. This book is merely a guide to help you look in the right place. I truly admire anyone who still has the hope that what they are looking for is still out there. This means you have hope. Without hope, we have nothing. So the fact that you're here reading this now is a testament to your faith, courage, and strength. I know with 100% certainty that you will find what you're looking for if you continue down the path you are on with the hope you have in your heart. I want to make it clear that this book is not the only book that contains truth. The truth lies within everyone and everything. You must look beyond the form, the physical, to see and experience the truth, the spiritual. The words in this book are not truth, they point to the truth. Look beyond words to see the truth for yourself. Truth cannot be intellectualized, it can only be experienced. The truth lies within a feeling, which is why it cannot be formulated into a word. If you want to find truth, look beyond the words and look for a feeling. Many who discover the truth will describe the feeling as one of complete peace, unconditional love, and an overwhelming amount of joy. People also describe it as the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling. It feels like you're finally home. Look for that feeling, and everything will be revealed to you. In this book, I will not say anything that you don't already know deep inside your soul. This is why it will be a familiar, unfamiliar feeling when you experience the truth. Don't try to use your intellect to figure it out. You won't. As soon as you intellectualize it, you have missed it. The truth does not come from memorizing a sentence or two. A child can do that, but they will not understand the truth. The truth comes in the form of a feeling. From that feeling will come the wisdom and truth you're looking for, which will set you free. That's what we are all ultimately seeking, isn't it? What I will unveil to you in this book will seem simple. It will seem almost too simple, and your brain, ego, will try to fight for it or attempt to make it more complex. It will think that it can't be this simple. When that time comes, I want you to remember that the truth is always simple. What is complex can always be broken down into its smaller counterparts. The truth cannot be broken down into smaller constituents, which is what makes it truth. This is why truth is always simple. If you want to find the truth, look for simplicity. Approach this book with an open mind and the heart of pure intention. To know the truth, you will receive everything you've been searching for. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude for being here and sharing your time and attention with me. Those are some of the most valuable life forces you could give to another. So, thank you for that gift to me, which you're also giving to yourself. Never forget your own divinity, because it is only through our divinity that we have our humanity. With love and light, Joseph. Chapter 1. The Journey to Finding the Root Cause of Suffering. People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. Thich Nhat Hanh. There's an important distinction to make when speaking about suffering. When I mention suffering in this book, I'm referring to psychological and emotional sufferings. There's a way in which, no matter what happens in your life, you do not have to suffer emotionally and psychologically. I'm not saying that what we go through is all in our heads or made up. Terrible and unfortunate events happen to people every single day. What I'm saying is that although we experience a lot of pain in our lives, suffering is optional. In other words, pain is unavoidable. But how do we react to the events and circumstances that happen in our lives is up to us, and that will dictate whether we suffer or not. Buddhists say that any time we experience a negative event in our lives, two arrows fly our way. Being physically struck by an arrow is painful. Being struck by a second emotional arrow is even more painful. Suffering. The Buddha explained, in life we cannot always control the first arrow. However, the second arrow is our reaction to the first. The second arrow is optional. When I first heard of this quote from Buddha a few years back, I was confounded because Although I understood what he meant, I did not know how I could apply this in my life. If anyone were given the clear choice of suffering and not suffering, I don't think anyone in their right mind would choose to suffer. How can I just choose not to suffer? But if it were as easy, that I don't think anyone would be suffering anymore. It wasn't until years later that I came across a new understanding of where suffering comes from, that I was able to stop it as its source. As I began my journey of self improvement, I came across a myriad of different teachings, studies, and methods to help people overcome their problems. I read dozens, if not hundreds, of books, studied psychology, went to therapists, listened to many different thought leaders, tried changing my different thoughts. Leaders tried changing my habits, waking up at 4 a.m., changing my diet, becoming more structured and disciplined. Shadow work, studying personality types, meditating daily, going on spiritual retreats, following spiritual masters, and researching different ancient religions. If you name it, I've probably tried it. I was desperate to find an answer because I wanted to know how to stop suffering in my own life, as well as help others do the same. Although some of these things did help me improve incrementally, it did not stop my suffering. I still always felt extremely anxious, fearful, unfulfilled, irritated, angry, frustrated, and heavy every day. Even after doing all that, I still don't discover the answer. And if I'm being honest, I was even more lost than before I started on this quest. I felt purposeless, hopeless, and directionless. I did not know what to do anymore, where to look, or whom to talk to. It was not until I was in my darkest hour that a glimmer of hope began to lead me to the light. All of a sudden, after years and years of searching, I stumbled upon one of my first mentors that taught me how to become a coach, and he revealed to me the answer of how I can alleviate my own suffering. The answer I discovered was in the understanding of how our minds work and how the human experience is created. Chapter 2, The Root Cause of All Suffering. One who looks around him is intelligent. One who looks within him is wise. Matosna Dilivayo. We live in a world of thought, not reality. Sydney Banks once said, "Thought is not reality, yet it is through thought that our realities are created." Each one of us lives through our own perceptions of the world, which are vastly different from the person right next to us. An example of this is that you could be sitting in a coffee shop having a quarter life existential crisis, completely stressed out of your mind about how you have no idea what you're doing in your life, when it seems like everyone else has theirs together, while the person next to you is happily enjoying their freshly brewed drink while peacefully people watching. You both are in the same exact coffee shop, smelling the same aroma, surrounded by the same strangers, but how the world looks to both of you could not be more different. Many of us go through the exact same events or are in the same location at the same time, yet are having completely different experiences of the world. Here's another example of how we live in a world of thought and not reality. If you walk up to 100 different people and ask each of them what money means to them, how many different answers do you think you'll get? Close to 100 different answers. Money is technically the same thing, but it means something different to each person. Money could mean time, freedom, opportunity, security, peace of mind, or it could mean evil, greed, and the reason why people commit crimes. For now, I'm not going to get into which one is right or wrong. Hint, there's no right or wrong answer, but that's for a different chapter. Another illustration of this concept is as follows. If you survey 100 different people and ask each of them what they think of our current president, how many different answers do you think you'll get? Even though it's the same exact person we are talking about, we will get 100 different answers because most people live in their own thoughts and perceptions of the world. The meaning or thinking we give an event is what determines how we ultimately feel about it. That meaning or thinking is the filter through which we see life from then on. Because of this, we live through a perception of reality, not in reality itself. Reality is that the event happened with no meaning, thinking, or interpretation of it. Any meaning or thinking we give the event is on us, and that is how our perception of reality is created. This is how our experience of life is created from the inside out. It's not about the event that happened in our lives, but our interpretation of them, what causes us to feel good or bad about something. This is how people in third world countries can be happier than people in first world countries, and people in first world countries can be more miserable than people in third world countries. Our feelings do not come from external events, but from our own thinking about the events. Therefore, we can only ever feel what we are thinking. Let's hypothetically say that you really hate your job and it causes you an enormous amount of stress, anxiety, and frustration. It pains you to even set foot in the building where you work, and just thinking about your job makes you furious. When you're thinking about your job, you're just sitting there on a sofa with your family watching a TV show together, but you're fuming at the thought of your job. Everyone else is having a good time except you. In this moment, everyone else in your family is having a different experience of life than you. Even though the same event is happening, just the thought of work created a whole different perception of reality, even though you're not physically at work. If it were true that external events cause us to feel the way we feel inside, then you should be a happy camper in your living room, watching a funny TV show with your family every single time you do this activity. But that's not the case. Now, you may be saying that you're only feeling this way because an external event, your job, is causing you to feel stressed and anxious. To that, I'll ask the question: is it absolutely true that every single person feels the same exact way about the job they're working in? Two different people can be doing the exact same job but will have completely different experiences of that job. It can be the most amazing experience and a dream job for one person, but be another person's worst nightmare and living hell. The only difference between one person and the other is how they think about their job, which determines how they ultimately feel about it. Now let's go back to the original scenario of you hypothetically hating your job. Remember how much stress, anxiety, and frustration it causes you when you think about it. Let's do a quick thought experiment about that by answering the question below. Would you be who would you be without that thought that you hated your job? Take 1 minute to see what comes up for you and do not move on until you do that. If you don't overthink it and truly let the answers surface from within you, without that thought, you will most likely feel and be happy, peaceful, free, and light without our usual thinking about a particular event or thing. Our experience of it completely alters. This is how we live in a world of thought, not reality, and how our perception of reality is created from the inside out through our own thinking. With this new understanding, you have just uncovered the cause of all our human psychological suffering. The root cause of all our suffering is our own thinking. Now, before you throw this book across the room and light it on fire, I'm not saying that this is all in our heads and that it isn't real. Our perception of reality is very real. We will feel what we think, and our feelings are real. That is completely undeniable. However, our thinking will look like an inevitable, unchangeable reality to us until we begin seeing how our reality is created. If we know that we can only ever feel what we are thinking, then we know that we can change our feelings by changing our thinking. Thus, we can change our experience of life by knowing that it comes from our own thinking. And if that is true, then we are Ever only one thought away from experiencing something different and transforming our entire lives at any moment through a state of no thought. In short, the moment we stop thinking is when our happiness begins. A young monk and the empty boat, a Zen story about how thinking is the cause of our suffering. A long time ago, a young Zen monk was living in a small monastery that was located in a forest which was near a small lake. The monastery was occupied by a few senior monks, while the rest were newcomers and still had much to learn. The monks had many obligations in the monastery, but one of the most important ones was their daily routine, where they had to sit down, close their eyes, and meditate in silence for hours at a time. After each meditation, they had to report their progress to their mentor. The young monk had difficulty staying focused during his meditation practice for a variety of reasons, which made him feel very mad. After the young monk reported his progress, or better said, lack of it, to his mentor, the elder monker asked the young monk a simple question that had a hidden lesson. Do you know what is really making you angry? The young monk replied, well, usually as soon as I close my eyes and begin to meditate, there's something moving around and I cannot focus. I get agitated that someone is disturbing me, even though they know that I'm meditating. How can they not be more considerate? And then when I close my eyes again and try to focus, a cat or a small animal might brush past and disturb me again. By this point, even when the wind blows and the tree branches make noise, I get angry. If that's not enough, the bird keeps on chirping, and I can't seem to find any peace in this place. The elder monk simply pointed out to his pupil, I see that you become angrier with each interruption you encounter. This is exactly the opposite of what is the point of your task when meditating. You should find a way not to get angry with people or animals or any other thing around you that disturbs you during your task. After their consultation, the young monk went out of the monastery and looked around to find a place that would be quieter so that he could meditate peacefully. He found such a place at the shore of the lake that is nearby. He bought his mat, sat and started meditating. But soon a flock of birds splashed down in the lake near where the monk was meditating. Hearing the noise, the monk opened his eyes to see what was going on. Although the bank of the lake was quieter than the monastery, there were still things that would disturb his peace, and he again got angry. Even though he did not find the peace he was looking for, he kept returning to the lake. The one Monday, the monk saw a boat tied at the end of a small pier, and right then an idea hit him. Why don't I take the boat, row it down to the middle of the lake, and meditate there? In the middle of the lake, there will be nothing to disturb me. He rowed the boat to the middle of the lake and started meditating. As he had experienced, there was nothing in the middle of the lake to disturb him, and he was able to meditate the whole day. At the end of the day, he returned to the monastery. This continued for a couple of days, and the monk was thrilled that he had finally found a place to meditate in peace. He had not felt angry and could continue the meditation practice in a calm manner. On the third day, the monk sat on the boat, rowed to the middle of the lake, and started meditating again. A few minutes later, he heard some splashing of water and felt that the boat was rocking. He started getting upset that even in the middle of the lake there was someone or something disturbing him. When he opened his eyes, he saw a boat heading straight towards him. He shouted, steer your boat away, or else you'll hit my boat. But the other boat kept coming straight at him and was just a few feet away. He yelled again, but nothing changed, and so the incoming boat hit the monk's boat. Now he was furious. He screamed, who are you, and why have you hit my boat in the middle of the vast lake? There was no answer. This made the young monk even angrier. He stood up to see who was in the other boat, and to his surprise, he found that there was no one in the boat. The boat had probably drifted along in the breeze and had dumped into the monk's boat. The monk found his anger dissipating. It was just an empty boat. There was no one to get angry at. At that moment, he remembered his mentor's question. Do you know what is really making you angry? and then wondered. It's not other people, simulations, other words, or circumstances. It is not the empty boat, but my reaction to it that causes my anger. All the people or situations that makes me upset and angry are just the empty boat. They don't have the power to make me angry without my own reaction. The monk then rowed the boat back to the shore. He returned to the monastery and started meditating along with the other monks. There were still noises and disturbances around, but the monk treated him as the empty boat and continued to meditate peacefully. When the elder monk saw the difference, he simply said to the young monk, I see that you have found what is really making you angry over and overcome that. Chapter 3. Why do we even think? I think and think and think. I've thought myself out of happiness 1 million times, but never once into it. Jonathan Safran 4. We as humans have evolved to develop a sophisticated ability to rationalize, analyze, and think because it simply helps us survive. Our minds do an incredible job to keep us alive, but it does not help us thrive. It is concerned solely with our safety and survival, but not our fulfillment or joy. The mind's job is to alert us of potential dangers in our environment that may threaten our lives. It does its job so well that not only will it scan our immediate surroundings for threats, but it will even reference our backlog of past experiences to create hypothetical scenarios and predict what it thinks could be future potential dangers based on our memories. None of this is wrong by any means. The mind is simply doing what it was designed to do. When we don't understand that its only duty is to help us survive, then we will get angry and frustrated with it. All conflict is derived from an innocent misunderstanding. Our mind's duty is to keep us alive. Our consciousness' duty is to help us feel fulfilled. Your soul is the reason why you're even on this journey in the first place, to find peace, love, and joy for yourself. Your mind has done an amazing job at what it was made to do, but now you may rebelieve it of its job because we no longer live in the wild where death could be right around the corner in a bush. If we keep using our minds, we will constantly stay in a state of fight or flight, anxiety, fear, frustration, depression, anger, resentment, and all negative emotions because the mind thinks everything is a threat to our very existence. If you want to be free, happy, peaceful, and full of love, then you will need to let go of listening only to your mind and go beyond it by turning into something much greater than that will help you not just to survive but to thrive. Chapter 4. Thoughts versus thinking. Stop thinking and end your problems. Lao Tzu. Thoughts are the energetic, mental raw material from which we use to create everything in the world. We cannot experience anything without thought. It is important to know that thoughts are a noun and aren't something that we do, but something we have. A thought takes no effort or force on our end, and it is something that just happens. We also cannot control what thoughts pop into our minds. The source of thoughts come from something that is beyond our minds, the universe, if you will. Thinking, on the other hand, is the act of thinking about our thoughts. This takes a significant amount of energy, effort, and willpower, which is a finite resource. Thinking is actively engaging with the thoughts in your mind. You don't have to engage with each thought in your mind, but when you do, that is thinking. Thinking is the root cause of all our psychological suffering. Now you might be wondering, where do positive thoughts fit into the picture? Positive thoughts or thoughts that feel good are not a result of thinking. They are instead generated by our natural state of peace, love, and joy. They are a byproduct of a state of being, not a state of thinking. We will go into depth about this in the next chapter. For now, let's do a quick thought experiment. I'll ask you a question, and all you need to do is to be aware of what you're experiencing, and we'll review what happened after. What's the dream amount of money you want to be making a year? Pause here and wait for an answer to surface. Give yourself about 30 to 60 seconds to think about your answer. of how much money you want to be making in a year. Don't move on to the next step until you've had a decently sized train of thought about how much you want to make. Now take that amount and multiply by 5. What do you think about this new dream goal for your income when we multiply that by 5? Take at least another 30 to 60 seconds to become aware of how you're feeling when you think about that and see what other thinking comes up for you as you feel your emotions. Don't move on until you've done the above. Okay, let's bring it back in and review what happened. After I asked the first question of what is the dream amount of money you want to be making per year, within a few seconds, an answer popped up in your mind. That is a thought. Now, notice how quickly and effortlessly that came to you. After an answer popped into your mind, I asked you to think about your answer. What happened once I asked you to think about your answer? If you're like most people, you probably went on a wild roller coaster once you began thinking about the thought. You might have been thinking how there's no way you can make that much. No one in your family is making that much money. You don't know how to make that much. It's stupid to want that much money or that it makes you greedy. Notice how you feel when you were thinking about those thoughts. Most likely, it did not feel that great, but that's okay, and I'll show you what you can do about it soon. This is a prime example of thoughts versus thinking. If I ask you a question, you will 100% have a thought that pops into your mind. Thoughts are not inherently bad. Remember that they are the energetic mental raw materials from which we create in the world. The moment we think about our thoughts is when we begin to get taken on an emotional roller coaster. When we think about our thoughts, we begin to judge and criticize the thoughts and experience all sorts of internal emotional turmoil. When I asked you how much you wanted to make, you had a thought about the amount. That thought was neutral and did not cause any emotional toil. In fact, you might have felt expansive and excited. It was only when you began thinking about that thought of how much you wanted to make, which is what caused the self doubt, unworthiness, anxiety, anger, guilt, or any other emotion you may have experienced. This is what I mean by thinking is the root of all of our suffering. Having the initial thought of how much you wanted to make did not cause any suffering until you began thinking about the amount of how much you wanted to make. It's not necessary to think about our thoughts or to judge them. It does us no good to do so. We may think that thinking is helping us, but all it's really doing is causing us to feel all of these negative, unwanted emotions and making us create reasons as to why we can't do it or why we should not want it. The only thing that was useful and helpful was the initial thought that popped into your mind when I first asked how much you wanted to make. All of the thinking that happened after was destructive and unhelpful. Thoughts create, thinking destroys. The reason thinking destroys is because as soon as we begin to think about the thoughts, we cast our own limiting beliefs, judgments, criticism, programming, and conditioning onto the thought, thinking of infinite reasons as to why we cannot do it and why we cannot have it. Without thinking, we prevent all negative programming and judgments from tarnishing the initial thoughts of what you want to create. If I asked you what are some ways you could make the amount of money you want, you sat there long enough, you'll experience the same phenomenon of having random thoughts pop into your head of ways you could make it happen. These are thoughts of creation. Thoughts are inherently infinite, expansive, and energetically positive. You will know you're having thoughts from the divine when you feel positive emotions, feel lighter and alive. As soon as you begin thinking about those thoughts of the ways you can make the money you want, you'll immediately feel heavy, restricted, limited, along with a whole onslaught of negative emotions. This is how you'll know if you're thinking. I use my feelings as an internal radar that tells me whether I'm getting direct downloads of thoughts from the universe or if I'm in my head thinking about my thoughts. You can only ever feel what you're thinking, so feeling and emotions are like an intuitive internal dashboard which tells me if I'm thinking too much or not. If I'm having a lot of negative emotions, I know that I'm thinking too much. This is another example of how we're naturally built for success. Below is a chart that compares thinking versus thoughts to help you identify which one is which within your mind. Third, thoughts versus thinking charts. Source, universe, ego, weight, light, heavy, energy, expansive, restrictive, nature, infinite, limited, quality, creative, destructive, charge, positive, negative, essence, divine, mortal, feeling, alive, stressful, emotion, love, fear, belief, infinite, possibilities, and confining, sense, wholeness, separateness, effort, effortless, laborious. Chapter 5. If we can only feel what we are thinking, do not we need to think positively to feel that way? We are ever only one thought away from peace, love, and joy, which come from a state of no thought. Deacon Pettinger. There's a caveat that I haven't mentioned yet to the principle that we can only feel what we are thinking. The more accurate way of describing it is that we can only ever feel negative emotions when we are thinking. The goal is not necessarily to completely stop feeling negative emotions. Some of the negative emotions can be helpful, such as feeling fearful when declining to walk down a dark alley alone with no one else in sight. These negative emotions are only helpful to us in terms of survival. But if we don't constantly encounter life or death situations, negative emotions are more unhelpful than helpful for most of us. We're going to be moving forward with the context that we're not struggling for physical survival. So we'll be using the context that negative emotions are not necessary most of the time. When I mention that we can only ever feel what we are thinking, most people assume that we must think positive to feel positive emotions. Instead of convincing you if this is true or not, let's do another thought experiment so you can experience the truth for yourself. Recall a time when you felt the most joy and love you've ever felt in your life and feel the feelings that you felt at that time as much as you can for at least 30 seconds. What kinds of thoughts were going through your mind at that peak moment when you felt the most joy and love? I'm not asking what you were doing at the time, but what thoughts were going through your head at that exact moment. For many people that answer this, they realize that they didn't have any thoughts during that exact moment. For others, they say that the thought was that they were so grateful or happy. For those that answered that they had the thought that they were grateful, did you feel that joy and love before you had that thought or after? Take 10 to 15 seconds to answer that question before moving on. What insights and epiphanies did you have? What's crazy is that most people did not have any thoughts going through their mind when they felt the happiest and the most amount of love in their lives. For those that had the thought that they were grateful, they felt that way before having that thought. If they had that thought, it happened after they felt the feeling. So the thought could not have produced the feeling. This brings us to another truth. You do not have to have thoughts or think to feel positive emotions. The beautiful part about truth is that it needs no justification because it can be experienced right here, right now. It does not need to be proven or rationalized to you, and you experienced this truth firsthand by the experience we just did. Here's why we don't need to have thoughts or think to feel positive emotions like joy and love. Our natural state of being is joy, love, ecstasy, freedom, and gratitude. This may be hard to believe because if it's natural, why don't we feel that way all the time? I'll answer this in a bit. If we want to see the natural state of anything, one of the best ways is to look at nature and the state of it in its infancy before it is affected and conditioned by its environment. For example, let's look at the natural state of a baby. What is a baby's natural and default state, assuming the baby was not abused, neglected, or had any physical issues? Are babies naturally stressed, anxious, fearful, and self conscious? Or are they naturally in a state of bliss, happiness, and love? Our natural state of being is joy, love, and peace. Therefore, any thinking that we do only take us away from those natural states of being, which is why whenever we feel extremely stressed, we are having a lot of thinking going on. The strength of the negative emotion we feel is in direct proportion to how much thinking we are doing in the moment. On the other hand, the intensity of the positive emotion we feel is inversely proportional to the amount of thinking we are doing in the moment. In other words, the less thinking we have going on, the stronger the positive emotion we feel in the present. To see the truth in this, recall a few other memories you had when you were extremely stressed and anxious and see how much thinking was going on at the time. Take about 1 to 2 minutes to do this. Then recall a few memories where you were at your happiest or felt the most joy and love and see how much thinking you had going on at that time. Take another 1 to 2 minutes to do this before moving on to really experience and internalize the truth of what you see. An analogy that my coach taught me that helped crystallize this concept was to imagine our mind has a speedometer like in a car, but instead of miles per hour, it is thoughts per minute. The more thinking we have going on, the higher the thoughtometer goes. And if we have enough thinking going on, it will go into the red zone. This is when we feel extremely stressed, burnt out, frustrated, and angry. It is not the context of our thinking that causes us stress, but that we are thinking, period. The amount of thinking we have going on is directly correlated to the magnitude of stress and negative emotions we are experiencing at any given moment. When you are experiencing a lot of frustration, stress, anxiety, or any negative emotion, just know that it is because you are thinking, and the intensity of those emotions is directly correlated to how much thinking is going on. Therefore, it's not what we are thinking about that is causing us suffering, but that we are thinking. To summarize, we do not have to try to think positive to experience love, joy, bliss, and any positive emotions we want, because it is our natural state to feel those emotions. The only times we do not naturally feel these emotions is when we begin to think about the thoughts we are having, thus blocking the direct connection to infinite intelligence, and we feel stressed, anxious, depressed, and fearful. It is not about the content of our thinking, but that we are thinking, which is the root cause of our suffering. The intensity of the negative emotions is directly correlated to the amount of thinking we have going on in the present. The less thinking we have, the more space we create for positive emotions to naturally surface. Chapter 6: How the Human Experience is Created. The Three Principles. If the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. Sydney Banks. At its fundamental level, the human experience is created by three principles: universal mind, consciousness, and thought. These three principles work together to allow us to experience everything we do in life. And if one of the three is missing, we would not be able to experience anything. These principles were first discovered by Sydney Banks, and now I have the humbling privilege to share them with you. Understanding these three principles enable us to know how we can alleviate ourselves from our sufferings, but also allow us to create from source. Universal mind. Universal mind is the intelligence behind all living things. It is the life force and energy that is in all things. It is how an acorn knows how to grow into a tree, how the planets know how to stay in orbit, and how our bodies know how to heal itself when we get a cut. It's how our bodies know how to self regulate and keep us alive without us having to manually do everything like breathing and beating our heart. The intelligence that knows how to do all of this and is in all things is called the universal mind. Many people call this God, infinite intelligence, the quantum field, source, and other names. This is where thoughts come from, as well as everything else in the universe. All things are connected by universal minds. There's no separation between anything, and any time there seems to be separation between things, it is merely an illusion of our thinking. When we are connected to universal mind, we feel whole, fulfilled, filled with love, joy, peace, and inspiration. It is only when we begin thinking, believing the illusion or ego, that we block this flow of universal mind and begin to feel separated, frustrated, lonely, angry, resentful, sad, depressed, and fearful. Universal consciousness. Universal consciousness is the collective consciousness of all things. It is what allows us to be aware that we exist and aware of our thoughts. Without universal consciousness, we would not be able to experience anything. Our five senses would have no use because there is nothing to be aware of. This is what brings things to life and make them perceivable to us. Universal thought. Universal thought is the raw material of the universe from which we can create from. It is our ability to think and create from form from the energy of the universal mind. It is the object we can perceive through consciousness. Without thought, we would have nothing to be aware of. Thought is like the DVD that contains all the information for us to be able to watch the movie on the TV. The TV and DVD player is like consciousness. It allows us to have a mechanism to bring the information on the DVD to life for us to be able to watch and experience the movie. The electricity that's needed to power the DVD player and TV is like universal mind in the sense that it is the invisible energy or force that connects and powers all things. It is the source from which everything can work and function. Chapter 7. If thinking is the root cause of our suffering, how do we stop thinking? A crowded mind leaves no space for a peaceful heart. Christine Evangelio. Heaven and Hell, a Zen parable. A tough, brawny samurai once approached a Zen master who was deep in meditation, impatient and discourteous. The samurai demanded in his husky voice, so accustomed to forceful yelling, "Tell me the nature of heaven and hell." The Zen master opened his eyes, looked the samurai in the face, and replied with a certain scorn, "Why should I answer to a shabby, disgusting, despondent slob like you, a worm like you? Do you think I should tell you anything? I cannot stand you. Get out of my sight. I have no time for silly questions." The samurai could not bear these insults. Consumed by rage, he drew his sword and raised it to sever the master's head at once. Looking straight into the samurai's eyes, the Zen master tenderly declared, "That's hell." The samurai froze. He immediately understood that anger had him in its grip. His mind had just created his own hell, one filled with resentment, hatred, self defense, and fury. He realized that he was so deep in his torment that he was ready to kill somebody. The samurai's eyes filled with tears. Setting his sword aside, he put his palms together and obsequiously bowed in gratitude for this insight. The Zen master gently acknowledged with a delicate smile, "And that's heaven." It's not possible to just entirely stop thinking, but what we can do is reduce the time we spend thinking so that it gets smaller and smaller each day that passes. Eventually, we can get to the point where we spend most of our day not caught up in our thinking and live in a blissful state most of the time. When we say that we want to stop thinking, many people assume that we're trying to stop all thoughts in general. This is not what we're trying to stop. We're trying to do. Now that you know the difference between thoughts and thinking, we're working on allowing thoughts to come and thoughts flow through us while we minimize the thinking about those thoughts that emerge. The most interesting and almost paradoxical thing about stopping our thinking is that we don't have to do anything to minimize it other than to be aware of it. By us becoming aware that we are thinking and that it is the root cause of all our suffering, it automatically makes us conscious to that fact and we become detached to it, allowing it to settle and pass. This takes almost no effort and is done through pure presence in the moment. Here's an analogy from one of my mentors that illustrates this concept. Imagine I give you a bowl of cloudy, dirty, murky water. If I asked you, how would you make the water clear? How would you do it? Take 15 seconds to see what answers come up with before moving on. Most people say something along the lines of filtering the water or even boiling it. What most people don't realize is that if we let the bowl of dirty water sit for a period of time, we can see that the dirt begin to settle on its own in the water, and after a while, the water becomes clear on its own. This is how our minds also work. If we let our thinking sit without disturbing it by trying to filter or boil it, the thinking will settle down on its own, and our minds will become free from thinking. The natural state of water is clear, and the natural state of our minds is also clear. If we do not disturb it, if life begins to feel unclear, disorganized, stressful, and you're not sure what to do next, you know that it is only because your thinking is stirring up the dirt, making your mind cloudy and difficult to see ahead. You can use this as an indicator to help you realize that you're thinking way too much. Once we become aware of the fact that we're only feeling what we are thinking, and that thinking is the root cause of our unpleasant experience, we see it for what it truly is, then we allow it to settle by giving it space. And slowly we will see how we begin to have a clear mind again. You can also compare thinking to quicksand. The more that we fight our thinking, the more it amplifies the negative emotions and the worse it gets. The same is true for quicksand. If we are in quicksand, the way out is not to fight. If we panic and frantically try to fight it, it only makes things worse by tightening the grip it has on us and pulling it under faster. The only way out is to stop struggling and allowing the natural buoyancy of your body to take over to bring you back up to the surface with ease. The only way to break free from our thinking is to let go and trust that our natural inner wisdom will guide us back to clarity and peace like it always has. If you find yourself fluctuating between thinking and non thinking, know that it is completely okay and quite normal. There's no way that we can remain in a state of non thinking every second of every day. And if we try to make that a goal, we will cause ourselves to suffer by forcing ourselves back into thinking again. We are spiritual, infinite beings having a physical, finite experience. Because of this, we are literally a living gateway between the human and the divine. So we will naturally oscillate between the two states of feeling anxious, stressed, and joyful or peaceful. We cannot control or prevent the oscillation between thinking and non thinking, but we can minimize the time spent in thinking and thus creating more moments where we do feel joyful, peaceful, passionate, and full of love. Although not being able to control when we begin to think can seem like we are cursed with an inevitable fate, it is not something to worry about because we can always return to the state of non thinking. It is just a part of our beautiful human experience. What can give us true peace is knowing that we always have this state of pure peace, love, and fulfillment underneath any thinking that we may ever have at any given moment. That beautiful state we always want is something we can never lose, but only forget. But just because we can forget it does not mean it's not there. Just like when it becomes night and the sun sets, we know that the sun is always there. We just can't see it. If we thought when the sun sets that it may never came back, then understandably we will have a lot of anxious and fearful thoughts. The same is true for our state of being. We are ever really one moment away from remembering what we always have, that infinite well of clarity, love, joy, peace, and fulfillment. We will forget sometimes, but when we do remember and realize that we are caught up in our thinking, when we experience negative emotions, that alone will allow us to return back home to our natural, beautiful state. All we have to do is remember it. Know that this is just our thinking, and have peace knowing that the sun is not gone forever and that it will rise again soon enough. Having that understanding will allow us to also appreciate the night time for its existence and role in the universe. From that, we can see how it is meant to be a part of our human experience and begin to cherish its beauty as much as the sun. Chapter 8. How can we possibly thrive in the world without thinking? Anxiety is thought without control. Flow is control without thought. James Clear. Here's a question that will guide you to an insight about this question. What thoughts are going through your head when you're doing your absolute best work, where you're fully captivated and entranced by what you're doing in the moment? Take about 15 seconds to wait for an answer to pop up before moving on. If you still haven't had the insight or epiphany from the answer, here's another question that may point you in the right direction. When you're loving what you do so much and are completely engrossed in it, that you lose all sense of time and space, aka when you're in a state of complete flow, what thoughts are going through your mind as you're in the state of flow in the moment? Pause here and wait for the answer to arise. Give it about 30 to 60 seconds for the insight to come in. When you're doing your best work and are in a total state of flow, where there's no separation between you or the work you're doing, you have no thoughts in the moment, and if you are having thoughts, it's just flowing right through you without you having to think about it. In other words, the state of peak performance for humans can be described as the state of non thinking. It may seem crazy, but we do our best work when we aren't thinking, and you just proved it with your own experience. Here's another example that will help illuminate the truth of this topic. When professional or even Olympic athletes are competing, do you think they are thinking and overanalyzing every single thing that has happened during the game? What thoughts or thinking do you think is going on during the competition for them? The highest performing athletes will describe when they are in their peak state, that they are in the zone. This zone is the state of flow or the state of non thinking. In Japanese culture, they have a beautiful word to describe the phenomenon, mushin. Here's the definition from Sotokan Times. Mushin is achieved when the mind is free of random thoughts, free of anger, free of fear, and particularly free of ego. It applies during combat and or other phases of life. When motion is achieved during combat, there is an absence of loose or rambling thoughts. It leaves the practitioner free to act and react without hesitation. He reacts according to all of the study and training that has brought the karateka to this point, relying on not what you think should be your next move, but on what your trained, instinctive, subconscious reaction directs you to do. After practice, thinking hinders the performance of athletes, and the same is true for everyone. We only hesitate and are reluctant, have doubts, insecurities, and fears only when we begin thinking and overanalyzing. We function and perform our best and embody our full potential the moment we enter a state of non thinking. Without thinking, we are free from limitations of the ego and are able to create the most incredible things in the world. I am not asking you to adopt this belief, but to try it and experience it for yourself so that you gain the insight to make it your own.